Welcome to the Lifting the Iceberg podcast. My name is Tyler James Berger, and on this episode, I have a discussion with Louie Izzo about his latest drawing titled Overwhelmed by Light. We talk about the creative process behind this piece, how to see and then portray subtle emotions in a portrait, and about the experience of ego-dissolution that is a motif in so much of his art. So, without any further ado, please welcome Louie Izzo. I'm sitting here with Louie Izzo. Louie, what's up, dude?
How's it going, man?
It's good. I'm excited to talk to you about your piece. Do you have a name for this yet?
I've played around with a few different names. The title kind of reveals itself slowly. So I play around, I put a few different names on it, think about it for a while. As of right now, this one's called Overwhelmed by Light.
Mm-hmm. And what is it about that name in particular that you feel encapsulates this piece?
Well, it's interesting because the piece itself is kind of telling me the name through the meaning that it reveals itself.
You didn't have the name at the beginning at
No.
all. You don't start with the name and then work from there. You created this. You just started this drawing and then you kind of wait until some kind of meaning emerges and then you put a name on it, right?
Exactly.
So it's like what I see here is this woman emerging from a forest or some kind of obviously like a winter forest. Where did you get that idea and what does that symbolize for you? This woman emerging from the woods.
Well, different than other pieces, this one kind of unfolded organically without any meaning in mind. So I started out with the portrait, built the portrait.
Who is this?
This is just a kind of muse I found with the perfect posture, perfect expression, her gaze that I found on the internet, and it called to me and I saved it like I do many photo references that I find.
So where did you start with this? You started with the figure of the girl and then you added the trees in the background?
Exactly.
Or did you already have the idea of making a portrait with the backdrop of the forest?
I had no idea that the trees were going to come. I started with just a portrait, building up the drawing like I would, totally going for a realism approach, getting my proportions in line, working on shadows, values, building in the hair, building in everything, making sure it's all good, and then adding a narrative. Where do I want her to be? What story am I trying to tell?
What expression is on her face?
Exactly. And the desk we're sitting at right now, when I look out the window in the wintertime, I see the tree line in front of the house. A lot of the dead trees in the morning when I'm working on the drawing, they're kind of in a gray haze as the morning mist kind of moves in. And I knew I wanted to incorporate those into a drawing. Didn't know it was going to be this one until the morning came and I put them in and I knew fell into place and it was perfect.
And I love your use of the human figure. Like, you really are hands down the best portrait artist that I know. Like, you are so great at portraying the human form and portraying expression. And what exactly is the expression on this girl's face as it relates to the rest of the elements in this piece?
So it's a very soft expression. You know, she has a light gaze, maybe a slight smile, but it's almost not there. If you look at it just right, you can see it. And that's kind of what I wanted I left the pupils open for about the whole drawing almost.
Mm-hmm.
I put no pupils because as soon as you put the pupils in, the emotion and the feeling of the portrait becomes instantly apparent.
Mm.
And I wanted to kind of leave that ambiguous
Hmm.
until the very end. So it played in nicely to the overwhelmed, and I guess more stunned is a better word you could say, because it's a blank type of expression.
Like a deer in headlights.
A deer in the headlights, exactly.
Yeah.
That oftentimes when we're overwhelmed by something, it can have a stunning effect.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of freeze up. Exactly. The deer in the headlights is a perfect example.
So this girl, she is leaving the woods. She's leaving this dark.
She's in the woods.
Oh, she's in the woods. Or
She's not out just yet.
Oh, interesting. So then, where is the light that she's being overwhelmed by?
So the patterns that are running over her face and hands signify to me that she's in the peak of an experience which is overwhelming her. And moving through the woods, I feel, is a good representation of that type of thing. You're in the thick of it. You don't know when it's going to end. And you're kind of moving along this path, hoping that you'll arrive at your destination. And the flickers and waves of fear that come along with that very intense stage of a journey.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that there's a certain darkness to the woods in this piece, not just because it's pencil, not just because of the color, but there's kind of like this ominous fog in the background at the base of the trees. The light that she's being overwhelmed by in this peak experience that she's literally wearing on herself, on her own consciousness, is this light like a benevolent light? You know what I mean? Or what exactly would you say this character that you've made, what is she experiencing?
So, as the meaning of the piece revealed itself as I worked, it became apparent that it was the perfect symbol for many experiences I've had, where the intensity of a mystical experience becomes too much to hold. And what was once good and playful becomes overwhelming. And the kind of starstruck power of the experience at a certain point, and I didn't plan this at all. So the symbol kind of just came to me through the drawing.
Yeah, and something that I feel like you're portraying well with this drawing is the motif of ego-dissolution and merging with the environment, losing the boundary between self and other, because you've done it so well, the way you've given the surface of her skin the texture of like polished wood, you know, kind of like wooden furniture. It's almost like she's losing her boundaries. Her boundaries are dissolving into her environment, into the woods that she is finding herself in. Is that something you were aiming to communicate, that quality of boundary dissolution that these peak experiences tend to offer?
Exactly. By using the type of wood grain pattern in the foreground on the face, also shown in the background of the trees, and also by putting a micro version of the treescape within her pupils. Much of my art plays that kind of game, which is the landscape and the environment and the central figure are coming together and merging. And that's something that just continues to happen unconsciously and unconsciously throughout my work.
Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of your pieces. Your one, I'm not sure of the name, but where you're holding up your hand and it's becoming like translucent as you're walking on the beach. You do have that in your body of work, this kind of this dissolving of yourself, giving way to your environment. Now, something I wanted to ask you about this, a broader question on portrait art in general. You've clearly done so much work on trying to perceive and then reproduce the human face and all the expressions that the human face can hold. Over the years of your refinement of your ability to draw a human face, I'm sure you've had to teach yourself how to see details of human expression that most other people might not even notice. You know, it's almost like to draw at this level, to draw a human face at this level requires you to have trained yourself to see micro expressions on a human face. Do you feel like the process of learning how to draw a human face has brought you into made you more attuned to seeing human expression in the people around you?
Definitely. I think that is, in a sense, the foundation of all visual art. Is there's a term in kind of academic circles of painting and drawing, laying in the eye, which is the master or the teacher has the eyes to see things that the student cannot. And through time and practice, they lay in your eye, they lay in your ability to see things that the average person overlooks.
Yeah.
Details, shadows, intricacies that your average person would not need to go into.
Yeah.
So whether it's a face or a landscape or anything, objects within your room,
A bowl of oranges.
the artist is attempting to recreate reality, which means a deep observation of reality is at the foundation of that.
And finding that thing that glitters out at you that you want to put a frame around in a way to communicate it to someone else, to communicate it to other people, to kind of to somehow kind of capture the significance that you perceive and in a way where other people can perceive it as well. When did you begin your journey with portrait art?
It's hard to say. As a kid, the thing that I always wanted to doodle was faces, eyes, nose, and mouth. And my brother actually kind of always held a very high standard, him being an artist as well and being a master of the portrait in my eyes. So I kind of crawled behind him at his, as younger brothers do, watching him work and wanting to be as good as him. So I learned much of what I know from him through observation.
And then you just kind of, well, what really drew you to continue doing it? Because right now it's not like you're learning from your brother anymore, really.
What's guiding me is the art that interests me. And my eyes and my emotions naturally gravitate towards portraiture and the human figure. And by placing a human figure, a human face in a piece of art, the story becomes all the more rich than if it was only a landscape or only objects laid. As soon as you put a person in there, there's an identity that you can project onto. There's certain relationships or experiences that are significant. And really, arguably, the richness of human life lies within human relationship.
Yeah.
So it just seems very natural to be drawn in that direction, to me at least.
For sure. And I mean, one of the primary things that humans are evolved to have a heightened perception for is faces, for reading emotions on other people's faces. And when you have a face like in the foreground, like this piece that you have here, it immediately portrays emotion and depth, because each person is a universe in themselves, a universe that kind of like through portraiture, a universe that begs itself to be understood. You know?
Yeah, I think you basically nailed the nail on the head. Emotion is probably the largest guiding force in why I make art in general, is invoking emotion, sharing of emotion, and when done just right, the human face and the human body can do something that no other image, I believe, can do.
Yeah.
In bringing up and stirring up emotions within ourselves that seem to be unlocked. And it can happen through, obviously, words from another person. But I think, it's such a natural inclination of mine to be drawn to portrait work and the human experience and portraying that.
Yeah. Now, what is the significance of the hood that the figure in this piece is wearing? Because when I see someone wearing a hood, to me, a hood symbolizes the desire for anonymity, the desire to somehow close yourself off, to bring your perception into a more tunneled, smaller diameter, so to speak. What is the significance of the hood that she's wearing?
Well, first and foremost, in the beginning of the drawing, it had zero significance. It was my relationship with the reference and the random chance that today I just chose this reference. And then as the piece progressed, then I began to inject my own meaning. And the hood plays nicely into the symbol because in experiences of mine and people that I know, when overwhelmed by the intensity of a mystical experience, there is a kind of desire to cover oneself. And whether it's with a blanket that has some kind of warmth and cozy significance, or even putting a hood over your head, there's a safety within the closure of this cloth. And I think when moving through the forests of something unknown, even though that cover doesn't truly shield anyone from danger, there's a certain psychological feeling that it does.
Yeah. Now, something you were telling me earlier, you started this piece in your sketchbook, just as a way you found a figure that you wanted to draw, and you just kind of did it experimentally. But then as this image started to gain momentum and started to gain traction, so to speak, you realized this wasn't just going to be another page in your sketchbook. At what point in the creation of a piece of art does an amount of significance announce itself from the piece for you to kind of continue it and flesh it out more professionally and ultimately like make prints of it? When did it become something more than just another sketch?
No, that's a great question. With each piece, it kind of arrives at a different stage. Some, like this one, its importance became apparent the second time I worked on it, really. And though the sketchbook has a reputation of being kind of loose format for, just getting ideas out.
And no commitment.
No commitment. Oftentimes very like half-assed done, you could say.
Sporadic, yeah.
A certain type of magic can happen there, and when one's inhibitions are kind of softened and relaxed, something really magical can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, one of my best drawings, I believe, emerged from that carefree type of mentality that I went into with it.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's an element of the symbol took on profound significance. When sharing it with others, I got good feedback across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So that also, activates your interest and shows that other people see it too.
And that there's this piece is going in a good direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. See, I think that's so funny how such good creative output can come from a mindset of non-attachment and like zero investment. Have you experienced before where you are about to start, say, a commission piece that there's pressure to have it be at like the best that you can make it, and does that create some kind of constriction on your creativity?
It used to. As my skills have progressed, I've come to understand that the less pressure I put on myself, the better. There's always room to improve. There's always room to change. So if in the beginning stages I remain lighthearted and I focus on the experience of creating and not the outcome, then my best work emerges. And I think ideally I can remain in that mindset throughout the whole piece. The perfect balance of skill and time and having fun all the way through. And if that works just right, then it's pleasing down to the last stroke, down to the signature.
Wow. So do you think that do you think you're going to add color to this? And if not, why would you rather just leave it just these shadings?
Yeah, I'd like to. I created several prints of this piece, so that's nice because then I can put the original aside and I can play around. And I'd like to put some watercolor. I'd want to lay in all the flesh tones and really play around with color, which obviously brings a whole new host of issues and challenges, but I'm confident that I could take care of it. And the nice thing about a print is if I fuck it up, then I can throw it away and get another one made.
For sure.
So that's always nice.
But
I do like more and more just the pencil. And seeing how far I can push the grayscale and what I can do with less. And what do you feel like the grayscale of pencil can do or portray that paint and color can't? What advantage does using solely the grayscale have? That's another great question. As an artist, when I look at a finished painting, let's say, and I'm in a gallery and there's a dozen finished works by an artist, probably the ones I'm most gravitated towards are the ones that are incomplete or drawings from the artist. Because my interest being the craftsmanship, I want to know how they did it. I want to know the early stages. I want to know what the first inspiration looked like, because there's a kind of purity that takes place at the pencil stage opposed to a completed painting to where it's so refined that it's
so
hard
many layers
to,
have been put
it's
on
hard
top
to
of
see
it.
that craftsmanship and the raw data, which really gets me turned on when it comes to art, is the raw.
Oh, for sure. Because that's one of the mysteries of art and creativity in general is where do ideas come from? And I feel like art, a piece of art in its first forms that's the artist's best. It's their best ability to capture that moment of inspiration. If it did happen in just kind of like a flash of getting an idea and needing to put it out on paper, something that can then later be fleshed out and added on to. But a drawing really does give a sense of that early creative spark.
Exactly.
Where does that creative spark for you? Where do you often find that coming from? Do you ever just get a flash of inspiration for an idea, or you just get a vision for a drawing or a painting? Where do those sparks happen for you?
Everywhere. The notes app on my phone, all of my sketchbooks, scraps of paper that I can get my hands on are all filled with ideas that come to me all the time. And whether it's for paintings, whether it's for drawings, whether for future whole series of paintings. And I just kind of collect those. And then when I need inspiration, I'll take a flip through and find one that
through the raw data of your inspiration.
Exactly. It could even, sometimes it's a combination of words. It won't be really a thumbnail sketch. It'll just be a half a sentence, and that will spark an idea.
So sometimes you will have a half a sentence and that will inspire an image.
Yes, definitely.
And that would be an example of having meaning before creating the image.
That would be.
For this piece, you created the image and then the meaning revealed itself.
Exactly.
And that, for me, that's two different approaches of creating art. It's like this top-down process of having the meaning and then creating the image to portray that meaning. And then there's this bottom-up process of creating the image and then the meaning revealing itself to you. Which leads me to my next question. What is your definition of visionary art? Because some people describe visionary art as this top-down process of having this vision, having this profound meaning that you feel was downloaded up into your mind, from a peak experience, and then the art just kind of follows that meaning. But then there's the bottom-up process. Would you consider that visionary art as well?
It's hard to say. I have an interesting perspective on this topic. I believe if you're an artist, then you're a visionary artist. What artist is not having a vision?
Yeah.
And for some, those types of categorizations and little worlds of art are significant. Not really for me. The labels don't really seem necessary in my experience of art. And but some people seem to enjoy it. The reason that I make art is to kind of stand outside of, I guess, any symbol other than what the piece itself represents. So if you want to call it visionary art, if you want to call it imaginative realism, if you want to call it surrealism, that's totally fine. You can choose to call it what you want, and I will just continue making images.
Yeah, because labels are so silly. It helps sometimes to create genres, to somehow articulate differentiations between things, but really they are just labels are just cubby holes,
exactly,
or filing cabinets.
I think anyone who's an artist or of any kind, the most common question that they receive is, what kind of art do you make? And I don't know if I'll ever stop struggling with this question, but the mind, especially people who aren't artists and are asking artists, they want to put you in a box that they can understand. And
when you're just dancing your dance,
exactly, and call it what you want. And maybe down the line I'll get better at that.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, it doesn't matter to me much.
Yeah, you're just making art.
Mm-hmm. But I do live in obviously a community that values visionary art and kind of separating it from other genres of art.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all well and good. It seems that they attempt to put a deeper, more spiritual meaning in visionary art than other types.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I don't know if anyone could truly draw that distinction of where spiritual art is and where materialistic art is, because the experience of a still life painter painting a bowl of fruit could be just as a spiritual experience as some person trying to portray some angelic realm. Who am I to say?
Yeah, because that artist who painted the bowl of oranges could be just trying to relay some kind of profound perspective that they had while looking at something seemingly ordinary.
Exactly.
I feel like that's when that's something that is common in peak experiences or quote unquote spiritual experiences, is that you see things that you've become so used to in a whole new way. Like your filters have just been cleansed and dissolved, and you see a bowl of oranges in a way that you've never seen them before.
Indeed.
And sometimes that the simplicity of that piece, who's to say that's not visionary art? Who's to say what experience that the artist had that inspired that piece was not profound?
Exactly.
And a spiritual experience. Yeah. Well, when someone looks at this piece, what do you hope that they get from it?
That's a great question. I don't know if me as the creator really have a part to play in that. I know how I felt, and the series of feelings and experiences associated with creating something, and once it kind of leaves my world, I don't know if it's up to me. I can contemplate and play around with the idea, or I can talk to people who ask me, but people will project their own meanings onto anything that I create, and I'm perfectly happy with letting that be where it lies.
Thanks again for listening to the Lifting the Iceberg podcast. You can find out more about Louie by following him at louieizzo.art on Instagram. You can stay up to date on any new podcasts at liftingtheiceberg.com or by following Lifting the Iceberg on Facebook and Instagram. This podcast is also available on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Thank you to Alexa Spaddy for designing the graphics for this podcast. You can find her at alexaspaddy.com. Thank you to Kerusu for the soundtrack Stay With Me. You can find Kerusu on Spotify, YouTube, and Soundcloud.